Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are still going to see high pressure dominating much of the next 5 days, but we are going to see some more sunshine and some bluer skies as we do see some slightly colder, drier air masses coming in from the north and the northwest, which will clear all that gloom and cloud away. As we see those transitions, though, there could be a little bit more precipitation around, but I do think that's a good trade-off of seeing some more sunshine over the coming days. As we head into the longer range, starting probably around next weekend, so sort of 7 days' time now, we are likely to go cold or very cold, as it does look very likely now we'll see northerly flows for the second half of the month. Severity and whether we'll see any wintriness with that is still yet to be determined, but as we saw from the GFS yesterday, it could be very extreme. As we've seen some from our more moderate runs, it could be a less extreme, or just more of a chilly sort of pattern with snow maybe in the north. The latest runs, as expected, aren't quite as cold as that GFS run we saw yesterday, but they are still along that colder spectrum, looking pretty chilly, and I think the biggest thing we need to determine now is that delivery of cold, how quickly that cold air will arrive. It's more of a northwesterly flow, taking a longer sea track. It will be more moderated, i.e. for southern areas, low-lying areas, maybe slightly milder, whereas if it takes more of a direct northerly or northeasterly, then it could be widely cold or very cold, and that's exactly what we saw from the GFS yesterday. So it's these finer details now that we do need to have a look at on those synoptic charts, and then hopefully at some point this upcoming week, maybe towards next weekend, we could have a look at the really fine details like the exact temperatures and of course whether there'll be any snow. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, first of all, I want to start by saying thank you for everyone who watched the video yesterday. As of recording this, we've got just over 60,000 views, so I think we really did hit the algorithm, so thank you for everyone watching that. This video probably won't do as well, because of course that video we were looking at the coldest November run I've ever seen, but hopefully we can continue the momentum going into the next few weeks. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see it is another generally dry day, but a bit of drizzle around across much of the Midlands into northern England and Wales, and a bit across the south coast, a little bit more extensive than we've seen recently, and of course some of the drizzle doesn't even show up on the radar, so again it's another pretty miserable day. But if we then further northwards, you can see more hefty showers, a bit of a remnants of a weather front, and that is this drier, colder air slowly moving in. I'd hoped that it cleared through a little bit quicker through Sunday. I'm recording this around 3:30 in the afternoon. I'd hoped that we'd see more of this dry, colder air in by the afternoon, but it's taking a little bit longer. But once it clears through overnight tonight for all, we should see something much brighter for Monday. So if you are looking out the window right now and it's all gloomy and horrible, we are fairly certain that it will be a different picture come tomorrow. Now, with all that gloom around, it's actually been mild at the upper air temperature level, but towards the surface actually felt cold. And you can see today temperatures are a little bit up, and that's because we are starting to see those changing air masses, moving that air around a little bit more. It means we see that cold layer trapped to the surface starting to dissipate away. So temperatures starting to climb, especially in the west, and it'll be up and down over the coming week. You can see across much of Eastern Europe, it's cold at the moment. Temperatures towards the low single digits, if not towards freezing. And that's because around the high pressure we've got over the top of us at the moment, it is drawing in northerly winds for the eastern side of Europe, and out towards Western Europe, more of a southerly flow. And that's why you can see the disbursements here of yellows further westwards and more lighter blues further eastwards. Now this, as I said, is going to shift over the coming days as this high pressure moves westwards and northwards, and it means this colder northerly flow is going to set up over the top of us. Now that is pretty much guaranteed now. Again, it's the severity, how quickly that air mass will move in, and the exact wind direction, which will decide how cold it will get, whether we just see some of these darker blues towards the mid-single digits during the day, or these lighter blues, which is more towards the low single digits, or if not freezing, if we saw some of the more extreme runs starting to appear. But if you do look at the latest UKV now, no risk of anything wintry in the coming 5 days or even the coming 7 days. It's beyond that. I do want to emphasise that, as I don't want anyone to assume there's anything wintry coming in the near future. It really is more as we head towards that sort of 20th, 15th to 20th. That's really where we're looking for the start of that colder conditions. Now, as you see over the next 24 hours, you can start to see all that dry, cold air moving in for the north. Still gloomy through this evening in the south, but it's into Monday. Look at that, a lot more sunshine by the afternoon. Still some high-level clouds and a few clouds more towards coastal areas, but inland it is a lot drier and clearer, most importantly. As we head through Monday into Tuesday, similar conditions. Could see some cloud dragging in from the east at times. It's starting to see a bit of an easterly flow, showing that high pressure ridging northwards and westwards. Instead of the high pressure being over the top of us, it is slightly further westwards already come Tuesday, and that's why we see this easterly flow developing. Nothing cold, because it is a slack easterly flow coming off a fairly mild northern and western Europe. At the moment, it's Eastern Europe that is cold, but it will still bring a bit of a chill in those eastern regions. As we transition into Wednesday, as I said, there could be some transient weather fronts at times, more persistent rain possible, and you see that a little bit into Thursday, and the gloom does return for a time, but still lots more drier, clearer slots, so it's not going to be as bad as it's been this week, but it still will be around at times. You can see there, no indication of anything remotely cold yet. As I said, must emphasise it is next weekend and beyond. That is when the risk does come in. Now, if you look at the max temperatures, you see this afternoon chilly further eastwards under the cooler, more miserable conditions, milder further westwards, so it's starting to clear. Into Monday, temperatures are hovering around average for the time of year, kind of 8 to 12 degrees. And the same can be said as we head into Tuesday. Potentially a bit of a frost overnight. As I said, it's a colder, drier air mass with those clearer skies. Allows some radiation overnight, allowing all that warmth to the surface, or relative warmth, to clear away. So again, frost could be a risk at times this week. As I said, into Tuesday, it's again average day, 8 to 12 degrees for most, maybe slightly chillier in a few spots. So it is cool or cold, but nothing too special at this stage. As we head into Wednesday, again, the risk of a bit of an overnight frost, especially for those northern regions. And again, we'll look at kind of 8 to 12 degrees. And then finally to Thursday, very similar conditions. Seeing much of this upcoming working week is turning a bit chillier, but it's really nothing too far from average. The risk of overnight frost starting to appear, which again is fairly expected for this time of year. This is the point where we do start to see more regular frost whenever we do see high pressure and especially clearer skies. Now, if we do have a look at the longer range now, which I know most people are watching this video for those cold and potentially wintry conditions as we head in towards the second half of the month. Now, you can see high pressure building in at the moment, but it is already moving slightly further westwards, and this brings those slack easterly flows in for this upcoming week. Eventually, by the end of the week, the high pressure is fully moving westwards, and you can start to see the low pressure moving eastwards, displacing the cold air within the tropospheric polar vortex towards Scandinavia. Now, this happens through next weekend, and you can already see the flow is starting to come in from the north by next weekend. So here, we're not very cold, but we are starting to turn chillier. More greens, the -5 isotherm getting nearby and starting to move in. Now, this is the exact example. It's about the delivery of that colder air. How does that air get to us? Here, if we follow those isobars, it's coming from Greenland, and it is a little bit deceptive on these 2D charts, these 2D maps, but this is actually a much longer sea track than if this was coming direct from the north. And that means all of this air gets a lot more moderated as it clears across the northern Atlantic, whereas if it was coming from Svalbard, from Scandinavia, it's a lot closer. So therefore it has to travel over both colder sea surface temperatures and across less of the ocean. So these subtle differences can make all the difference when it comes to wintry potential and could sort of impact their temperatures by a few degrees. So eventually, into the start of the next working week, it's more of a slack northwesterly initially, chilly, but nothing amazingly cold. It's the subsequent days where we start to see that wind coming more from a straight northerly. You see the isobars are tilted more from Svalbard at this stage, and you can already see a low pressure system bumping into that cold air. that would bring the risk of some heavy snow potentially in northern regions. Eventually all that cold air arrives for all by the end of the week, and look at that, we're all in the -5 isotherm. It is cold, if not very cold, and you can see that we have smaller low pressure systems potentially moving through. You can see the isobars starting to spread out. That would allow those temperatures to fall away significantly overnight, and eventually right toward the end of the run we start to see some milder conditions trying to come in off the Atlantic, but still a bit of blocking to our north. The jet stream still displaced to our south, so I wouldn't be surprised if the cold continued for a little bit longer. So you see, nowhere near as severe as the run yesterday, but nonetheless still delivering very cold conditions, and it's all about the exact positioning of the synoptics. It's even more vital for this time of year because there is not as much cold air to be delivered our way with this northerly wind, because it is still November. If this was more January time, there'd be a lot more colder air, and if it wasn't quite a direct northerly, or the coldest air was displaced eastwards or westwards, we'd still be on the peripheries and we'd still see very cold conditions. But as we get those direct north or northwest easterly winds, you can see the very cold air really is only what is a much smaller area than if it were December or January or February. So again, that's something we do need to take into account. Not all cold spells are equal depending on the time of year. We are at the prime time of year for weak sunshine, short days, all compared to sort of March. So it does it is advantageous in that way if you're looking for wintry conditions, but then we don't have as much cold air available. So again, we've got to kind of balance these things when trying to forecast what exact temperatures and the risk of snow here. I do just want to go over to WX charts because it just illustrates this a little bit better. If we go back to the weekend, you can see that cold air moving in, but if you watch all these purples as they move southwards, they do lose their intensity quite quickly. And this purple air mass, that is very cold. That's the -10 isotherm or colder. You can see as it all moves southwards, it loses intensity pretty quickly. You see this big plume going out into the North Atlantic does lose its intensity pretty quickly. And again, it's all about how direct is that air heading towards us. You can see here though, we're firmly in the Arctic air. It's just how cold will it be? And that could determine exactly what conditions we see at the surface. Now, if you compare to the GM, this has been one run that's been pretty pessimistic over the last few days if you have watched the videos. Today though, it is pretty on board with something cold or very cold. High pressure moving to the west this coming week. Eventually we start to see that northerly wind starting to appear, and it's not a northwesterly like the GFS, or it is maybe for a short time, but it goes direct northerly much faster. So instead of dragging out that northwesterly, it's straight northerly. You can literally follow the isobars back to Svalbard up towards the North Pole, and you see towards day 10 it is cold or very cold. And then look what happens. We see a channel low developing, and this again could bring heavy widespread snow. Again, if we zoom in, if we look at the upper air temperature, you can see it does bring milder air in for southern England and South Wales, so this would be sort of Midlands northwards for heavy snow. But if you know these channel lows well, over the past few years we've seen this quite a lot, they do trend southwards. So if we did see this chart appearing again in a few days time, then there would be a lot of interest, and again I wouldn't rule out snow for southern England just because these systems do trend to get forecasted further northwards than they actually end up being. So again, this would be very interesting. And if we look at the snow, already predicting many inches of snow here for the Midlands a week on Tuesday. So again, not a forecast, but just showing you what could occur if this pattern came off. And of course, in the subsequent days, that clears, and then we go back straight back into a very strong northerly wind, very big block towards Greenland, and we again are cold or very cold. Again, if we did get this, or if we get another pulse of colder air, that would be beneficial. You can see the cold air is starting to run out a little bit on our shores. But regardless, if we look at the surface temperatures, widely down towards freezing, and daytime temperatures at midday for much of the region that's got a bit of snow, and especially is kind of Midlands northwards, is freezing during the day as well. So GM, very pessimistic the last few days, but finally properly on board with something cold or very cold. Now, to finish by looking at the east and the ref, this has been fairly consistent. It's been cold, or very cold over the past few days, but it's not gone overboard like the GFS has. So I think it's been the sort of steady run that we've seen over the past few days. You can see again moves out to our west, initially a bit of a northwesterly, but very quickly it clears to a more of a northerly. It's all about clearing that low. It does develop over the top of us within the colder air, so that would be a very interesting interaction to see what that would deliver. And of course it does delay the very cold air arriving. You can see it does develop within slightly milder air, but eventually it clears, and then we start to drag in all this Arctic air in from the north. So the east and the west a little bit slower in developing, and again it's all about the delays in that northerly wind arriving, but it is still very similar. And again, subtle changes could change those surface temperatures and those surface precipitation quite a lot. Again, we'll have to wait and see. But the big thing is all three runs still on board with northerly flows and generally northerly winds arriving around next weekend into the following week. Now, if you look at the ensembles to finish the video, you can see very strong support now for below average temperatures from around next weekend. You can see 17th, 18th of November, that's where we see that big dip, and we are around 3, 4, maybe 5 degrees below average now. It's a -5 line, that's where you're watching for any snow. That's the kind of temperature we need to get to see low-lying snow. Again, sometimes it needs to be even colder than that, but that's kind of the benchmark, especially when we look at longer term. You can see maybe a third of ensemble members are getting down to there, so it's not a given that it will be cold or very cold, but you can see it is looking more and more likely. If you've watched the videos, we're seeing this trend slowly, that ensemble mean is dropping, and you can see precipitation picking up as well. So it's not going to be a very cold and dry pattern. It is looking pretty wintry if those cold air masses did arrive. You can see the GFS operational. It does take a bit of time for that cold air to arrive. It is a little bit more of an outlier, a bit above that ensemble mean, but eventually is one of the colder runs in the longer term. So still, again, lots of disagreements here, but again, the overall outlook is for generally chilly or cold conditions. TBC temperatures dropping off quite significantly next weekend, down from sort of 9 or 10 degrees for most this working week, down to maybe 5 or 6, and that's the ensemble mean, taking into account the milder runs. So if we take more the colder runs, which as I said is the more likely option, but not guaranteed, we're probably looking at 3 or 4 degree daytime highs, freezing or below freezing overnight. And again, those could vary by a couple of degrees depending on cloud amounts, precipitation, and of course the exact air mass, which is still yet to be determined. And again, the most exciting bit is snow. You can see new snow spikes, quite a few, but again, nothing too reoccurring at this stage. If we did just compare to Glasgow, for example, though, again, you can see quite a few and one massive spike here. So you can already see the models are not in agreement, but just show you that the risk is there into the longer term. And if we do just look at Glasgow again, you are seeing it is going to be cold there as well. More runs here in agreement that it's down to that -5 area. So again, looking more than likely that it is going to be cold and wintry, especially in Scotland. You can see those 2 metre temperatures dropping down towards a low single digit and even well below freezing overnight. Now finally, if we compare to the ECMWF, which is of course always a little bit more pessimistic, I find it always is a little bit moderated, and I think it's because it's got more ensemble members, and of course the model is a little bit less wacky than the GFS. The GFS is a little bit all over the place sometimes, because even here we are a good few degrees below average from around next weekend onwards. Yes, there are some runs above average, but the majority are clustering around that sort of -3 to -5 region. So again, fairly strong support here for cold and generally chilly but unsettled conditions as well. So we'll have to wait and see what happens next week. Again, the next few days will be very interesting to watch, because it could decide whether it's a cold, chilly and unsettled kind of pattern where temperatures are mid to low single digits but nothing too special, or it could give us a very cold and wintry pattern if some of the more colder and more sustained and blocks runs come off, similar to that GFS we saw yesterday. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.